Good evening to all of you. I'm very happy to join this group and to see that even in these difficult days, you are all assembling and making use of this time to improve our efficiency, our skill, our knowledge, and it is you have chosen a very relevant topic also because we see and hear so many fake news, and Mr. Pavan Duggal, who is an expert in the field, can give you very, very, very valuable information and to tide out the situation which we are now facing. And I am happy, and I will continue to join with this group for the further deliberations on various aspects. And you can choose any subject and have discussion and detailed presentation by eminent people, so that the young lawyers who will be richly benefited by this sort of association, who are to wait, and because the time is precious, and I don't want to speak more on this occasion. Is an opportunity which all the young lawyers should make use of it. And with these few words, I formally inaugurate this venture. I wish all success, and let this sort of the good things happen future. And let us we hope that this problem will be, our corona problem will be over the shortest possible time, and this sort of during this short time, we will make use of the time and opportunity for the young and budding lawyers of this country. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
So, I welcome on the behalf of Law Joint, welcome Pavan Duggal sir is with us. Now I request
So good evening, friends. It's a wonderful occasion to be with you this evening. Today, we are going to talk of one of the biggest challenges that COVID-19 has brought forward. Now, this challenge has got nothing to do with the public health emergency, but is purely, shall I say, making the health emergency as the basis for dissemination. And that is fake news. Well, whatever I see fake news all around us. Coronavirus, game changer. So much so that when human history is going to be written, it will be written as BC and AC, before Corona and after Corona. That being so, we've seen that fake news was already with us prior to Corona. In fact, it's been with us in some form or the other ever since we saw the dissemination of this kinds of exercises. But the advent of Corona has actually brought forward a completely new paradigm. For example, Corona has suddenly led to a lot of these fake news. This is the news of Maradona, which has gone live, viral on social media, only to realize that it's definitely not the true one. So much so that fake news is now disseminating and is targeting every sector of human activity. Even in the Bitcoin industry and the Bitcoin ecosystem, a fake news can actually lead to a surge of buying, of selling, of surge into the pricing or the valuation of a particular crypto asset or cryptocurrency per se. So much is significant that this particular area, we are seeing different countries taking some steps or the other. And here is the case where the French government has taken down the coronavirus fake news webpage. So countries, whenever they get time, apart from the public health emergency, they are purely trying to see how they can battle with fake news. Here, yet another fake news dealing with an Indian politician. It was apparently some retweet of an old video, but it was found to be false. Actually, today, we are in a different world altogether, primarily because it's an atmosphere of fear and panic. And these fake news creators and disseminators are going ahead and immunizing these kinds of fears and panic modes in order to target the lay internet users per se. Well, look at this. Any kind of fake news cannot be complete without Twitter, because Twitter appears to be the foundation of dissemination of fake news. So much so that Twitter has itself agreed that it hasn't done enough as it should have done in the direction of trying to control trolling and other fake accounts that are happening. Now, people can say, I create a fake account and it's a joke, but it's no longer a joke when your joke has a detrimental impact upon others and their lives and their thought processes. So a lot of people said that the boys' locker room case was also fake news. Subsequently, they came to know, no, it was not fake news, it was correct. But after the boys' locker room case got to be reported in India, one started finding various reportings of different other kinds of boys' locker room cases or girls' locker room cases. And a lot of these were not necessarily very accurate. Surely, it was a flavor of the moment. At the time, it got leaked out. And then during that short period of time, the fake news spreaders were going forward and continuing to piggy ride on its so-called popularity. But one thing is very clear. During COVID-19, there's so much of fake news that it appears to be a flood. A new floodgate has opened up. And unfortunately, because we are in fear and panic, we want to go ahead, read the latest news, believe the news to be correct, and then go forward and try to act on the news. We try to become the preachers or the disseminators of the cutting edge news without realizing whether the said news could be fake news. Thereby, we often become pawns in the hands of fake news generators. But one thing is very clear. While fake news has grown extensively, but social media firms clearly have failed to act on COVID-19 fake news. Well, come to India and you suddenly find a lot of cases being registered pertaining to people who have been sharing fake news and disseminating. In this case, another person was arrested for allegedly sharing a political party's leader's morphed picture. So when you are a user and you get to read or see or hear the said electronic content, 95% of the times, you yourself do not tend to put your own independent evaluation. And if we tend to further disseminate it, we become a part of the huge chain. In this case, yet another case was registered against a political worker because they were sharing morphed images to harass another political worker from another political party. Actually, the COVID-19 times have been great fertile times for growth of cyber crimes and cybersecurity breaches. Never in the history of independent India, and never in the last 25 years when internet was commercially introduced in the country, we have seen such a case, such a time where cybercrime has grown to such phenomenal levels. And purely fake news is also playing a very important role in this complete dissemination. Well, earlier we used to talk of ransomware, malware, but now we are talking about fearware. This is that computer contaminant programming or software which comes and gets installed inside your system or your device so as to create fear and panic amongst you. And all of us would have not realized that this fearware is getting more and more prevalent. I look at fake news and I go to a couple of years back. We saw these various instances of fake news, of news in the US presidential elections, of the Indian demonetization, of a chip being embedded in the new currency notes for monitoring. You think of any situation and lo and behold, you find it was actually happening. You had other cases of where fake news dissemination got to be going forward in different manifestations and avatars. Invariably, traditionally, people believe that fake news has got a direct connection with elections. Surely, people who want to disseminate fake news, want to have cogent, positive impact upon electoral results. And therefore, whether it's the US elections, whether it's the India elections of 2018, whether it's the assembly elections of 2019, you look and you see that fake news has begun to start impacting our lives. The Indian elections of 2019 saw so many instances of fake news effectively getting disseminated. But is it impacting people? It's not just impacting people, it's impacting their minds, their thought processes, their perspectives, and even their opinions about the persons who are either featured in the said fake news or who are target to the said fake news. No wonder on social media, we have begun to start seeing the dissemination of huge volumes of fake news related criminal activities. And this is happening globally. This is happening in India. And there are legal ramifications. You try disseminating on fake news on social media and you think nothing will happen to you, you better well need to be careful. Primarily because there are laws in different parts of the world which can be invoked, even in the absence of dedicated laws on fake news, to target you or to prosecute you per se. We are today so much dependent on WhatsApp. WhatsApp, I believe, has become a national religion of countries like India and Brazil. Why? Because it tends to connect people so intrinsically. In fact, in the context of India, no other technological force has united Indians so much as WhatsApp. But quickly realize that WhatsApp has become a very hotbed for dissemination, creation, transmission, and subsequent forwarding of all kinds of fake news and fake messages. And because it's coming on WhatsApp, a new mindset is evolving. That because it's on WhatsApp, it should not be false. It could not be false. And most of the Indians would tend to believe what they see on WhatsApp to be correct without doing any independent corroboration of the same. Well, coronavirus has brought us back to homes. The national lockdowns, not only in India, but across the world, saw billions of people being forced to be at home. So while the offices shifted to home, the work from home became a new paradigm. We started increasingly relying more on video conferencing. And lo and behold, video conferencing has become a good, yet another vehicle for dissemination of fake news. Because on video conferencing, people are discussing all kinds of fake news that they've either read or they have produced or they have potentially seen. So video conferencing, apart from being a wonderful tool for communication, has also started contributing to further dissemination and the growth of fake news across the world. In fact, the ground realities are completely changing. The work from home now is a well-established legal paradigm across the world and in India per se. And while in the last few months, we have taken to work from home like fish to water, the fact still remains is that work from home brings across large number of legal paradigms. And one of those paradigms relate to fake news. When you're in office, you're talking to people, you're meeting people. So you can independently still find out whether something is correct, not correct. But sitting at home alone, in front of your computer, working all the time, working from home on their own device, without any physical interaction, you are more likely to not just believe what you see is correct, but more likely to further disseminate it, even while you're working from home on official devices and on official networks. So that's begun to start giving a new ramification on fake news. Well, a few weeks back, I wrote this book called New Cyber World Order Post-COVID-19 that's currently available on Amazon. In this book, I've argued that while the world has been busy looking at how we will control coronavirus, the fact is that a lot of very significant changes have begun to start happening below the surface. A majority of these changes are happening in cyberspace, and these changes are all contributing to the evolution of a distinctive new kind of world order in cyberspace. So when we are finally going to be successful in our fight against COVID-19, the cyberspace that we will be entering into will be having a new color, a new tinge, a new flavor. That will be representing the new cyber world order. It will be a world order which will be completely and dramatically different. The internet of pre-COVID-19 times is not going to be there. States are going to be very powerful. Cybercrime is going to be constantly a constant companion for us. There will be increasing cybersecurity breaches as we go forward. And there are going to be more migrations of legitimate users from the superficial net onto the dark net. We are going to see some massive impacts upon enjoyment of digital freedoms and digital liberties. So in this new cyber world order that's currently getting developed as we talk, fake news is also playing an important role. In fact, fake news is also building fake plus very significant foundations for the further development of the new cyber world order. And I think when I start looking at fake news and cyber law, I believe that the new cyber world order has to be kept in mind by all stakeholders as they go forward to deal with the paradigm of fake news. Well, the fact is, what is the issue pertaining to defining fake news? How can you legally define it? Well, it appears that as we are talking, there is somebody who is into this particular web meeting, which is about to go ahead and engage in Zoom jacking, because I just suddenly saw something appearing, happening on the screen. But hopefully, we should see not much action. So the bigger issue is, how do we determine, how can you legally define fake news? Who defines fake news? Is it fake from the governmental standard? Is it false? Is it inaccurate? Or is it simply not according to facts? So I think there's a need for common legal definition and parameters pertaining to fake news. I think you have to quickly realize today that there is an increasing connection between fake news and cyber crimes. Fake news today is not just itself a kind of a cyber criminal activity, but more significantly, it is also going to be the mother rock bed for the further development and evolution of new kinds of cyber crimes. And therefore, publication and dissemination of fake news, I think invariably across the world, must now be seen as a criminal activity that is done with a criminal intention. So there will be an actus reus of publishing the said fake news, and there must be mens rea of doing it with the intention to cause wrongful loss. Another major issue that has got a connection with fake news concerns cyber security. Now you would think, what has got fake news got to do with cyber security? Well, the answer is very clear. Today, when you are getting fake news, it's just not normal electronic records that you're getting. Invariably, the fake news electronic record that you will get would be laced with computer contaminants. A lot of time, there will be malwares, spywares, even ransomware would be embedded in these fake news articles or records, so that they enter into your system, they go ahead, destroy your data, diminish its value and utility, and more significantly, completely go and suspend your operations. So increasingly now, we are beginning to find that cyber criminals and cyber security breaches are wanting to take the route of fake news for purposes of going ahead and accessing your device, your specific data that's resident therein, and breaching the cyber security so that they can potentially be benefited by these exercises. Another major issue in cyber law that's got a connection with fake news deals with privacy. Does fake news violate somebody's privacy? I think clearly yes. At least the privacy of the person who's featured in the fake news. Because when something false is being actually said about someone else, you are infringing his personal privacy and also his data privacy. And then if you are actually disseminating false information about some target person, then you have a direct prejudicial impact upon the enjoyment of his personal privacy as also data privacy. Now, those are areas that I believe that legal frameworks have to specifically start addressing. We have not seen globally any specific focus on these areas, but now with the advent of coronavirus and with new kinds of fake news, specifically laced with coronavirus. I think it's time to look at the data privacy and personal privacy of the fake news and its impact on individuals per se. So that's one issue. I also want to talk about that today there is so much of massive increase in malicious domain names that are getting registered by the name of coronavirus, or COVID-19. The idea is very simple. The idea is they want to create these domain names. They want you to lure you to these kinds of websites. There will be a lot of fake news, fake content on these websites. And once you go to these websites, your own devices could potentially be compromised in terms of being infected with computer contaminants, malwares, virus, and so much so, all kinds of ransomware and malware kinds of exercises. Therefore, when I look at the data protection and fake news, I realize that there is an intrinsic connection. Lawmakers across the world also need to realize that they have to work on the intrinsic connection between both fake news and data protection, because if fake news leads to violation of your protection of your data, then clearly you need to have actionable remedies available against persons. Can fake news really impact prejudicially public order? The answer is a clear yes. We saw so much of fake news in the Delhi riots in February and March 2020 before coronavirus took our lives away. We have begun to start seeing that all kinds of state and non-state actors are increasingly engaging in fake news. They are using fake news as an ammunition to go ahead and target the public order against the targeted state action or any specific locality. So if you think that your riots are just local riots, think again. I believe there could be a variety of other state and non-state actors who could have played a very effective and efficient role in dissemination of fake news pertaining to rioting so that the public order could be prejudicially impacted. And I think the cyber criminals have very quickly understood. You may not want to read a newspaper today. You may not have the time to read anything lengthy, but yes, you have a time to instantaneously grasp, process, serve, and transmit all kinds of information that are flashy, that instantaneously gather your attention, or that may look to be extremely urgent, but may land up to be just a manifestation of fake news per se. I think fake news has a direct connection also with electronic governance, because fake news now is shaking the foundations on which electronic governance related issues are now being dealt with. And that's going to be a big challenge. Therefore, the big learnings that we have learned during coronavirus times is that in these times, cyber resilience will have to be specifically focused on. So like we are hearing so much about need for enhancing our body immunity, I think there's also a need for enhancing our cyber immunity. And that can happen if we start adopting cyber resilience methodologies and approaches. And one of the key thrust areas of such cyber resilience policies will be to be standing out against fake news, not to be swayed away and be prejudicially impacted by the dissemination and continued publication of fake news. Do we think that fake news could have an impact upon the sovereignty of a country? Now that could have been an academic question a few years back. It no longer is an academic question, primarily because in the last few years, a new legal concept has evolved. And that concept is the concept of cyber sovereignty, which effectively means the sovereign interests of a sovereign government or a sovereign country in cyberspace. So traditionally we thought as lawyers, as law students, that sovereignty of a country was invariably limited only to the territorial boundaries of a nation. That was the established legal norm all these centuries. But come the second quarter, the second decade of the year of the 21st century, and we saw countries like China coming up with a new concept in their national cybersecurity laws. For the first time, they propagated the concept of cyber sovereignty. Chinese cybersecurity law categorically stated that the sovereign interests of China not only go up to the territorial boundaries of China, but also exceed and are applicable in cyberspace, in the internet and the World Wide Web, apart from the polar regions and the outer space. So since that, we've begun to see a massive kind of an arms race happening amongst countries. They are increasingly expanding the scope of their cyber sovereignty in terms of protecting their sovereign interests in cyberspace. So if you are a sovereign government and your sovereign interests are going to be prejudicially impacted, then one element that could impact the same will be fake news. Why? Because fake news could have the impact upon poisoning the minds of your population, about creating doubts in the minds of the citizens as to whether the government of your country is at all capable or has the requisite capability to go ahead and protect your legal interests. So increasingly, we are finding that both state and non-state actors across the world are increasingly now going ahead and using fake news for prejudicially impacting the sovereign interests of other countries, both in the physical world as also in cyberspace. So it's only a question of time before we start recognizing that fake news has a direct detrimental impact upon the sovereignty of countries, including cyber sovereignty. And the best way to go ahead and address the same would be to come up with appropriate enabling legal frameworks in this regard. Another element I want to sensitize to you pertains to the relationship between darknet and the fake news. Now you will say, what has darknet got to do with fake news? Well, darknet has got such an important element to do with fake news. Let me first begin by addressing what exactly is darknet. Because we are all on the internet. We use Google, Facebooks, Instagrams, the Yahoos of the world, and we find that's the internet. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that's not the internet, but that's just a superficial end. Let me give you an example. This is a glass of water. If this glass of water is the complete internet, then the first 15% is what's known as the superficial net. That's the network that you and I go on a daily basis in terms that there are search engines like Google, Bings, and Yahoo's here. From 15 till about the 85% is that content on the internet, which we call as the deep web. There'll be a lot of academic content. You can go ahead and search for buried treasures of information. But the last 15% of this glass is the darknet. That's one particular area of the internet where you cannot go using a search engine. You will have to go to this area of the darknet using a Tor browser, a specific kind of a browser. And what does the browser do? The browser anonymizes you. And when you go and arrive online in the darknet, you are anonymous. Everybody else is anonymous. Cybercrime is a way of economic activity and economic model there. No wonder fake news has begun to start getting a direct connection with the darknet. Because once the cyber criminals have realized that there is no way the law enforcement agencies will be able to go ahead and even identify them or reach out to them, they are using the platforms of the darknet for creation, dissemination, publication, and forwarding of all kinds of fake news. And I think as time passes by, we need to come up with legal frameworks so as to contain the dissemination of fake news through the darknet. But assuming you have fake news today, you have bigger cyber legal challenges. The first challenge is, how do you attribute that dark fake news to a particular cyber actor? Because most of the actors today are very, very intelligent. They are hiding behind their electronic footprints. They are sanitizing their footprints. And consequently, it becomes difficult to track them. Similarly, another issue would be issue of jurisdiction. Assuming that you are able to track these people. If these people are located outside the territorial boundaries of your country, then how do you deal with them? Does your national cyber laws apply to them? And if these apply, how will they apply? Will the other country not object to your laws being applicable? So clearly, my work in the last 25 years in cyberspace tells me that, look, much that you can come up with extraterritorial laws and give them extraterritorial applicability on paper, in reality, it is very, very difficult to enforce your national laws outside your territorial boundaries, because that interferes with the sovereign rights of other third-party players or countries or governments per se. So we will have to look at these issues pertaining to attribution and jurisdiction issues that fake news presents. I wanted to look at the global space and find out, is there any international law on fake news? And I found out that there is no international law on fake news. In fact, there is no cyber law internationally which is applicable. There's no specific international law on cybersecurity breaches. So what are we talking of? We're talking of a fractured internet, a fractured world, where the internet has indeed made geography history, but governments and the countries have built artificial boundaries in the said boundaryless medium by coming up with their own national cyber laws and making their national laws applicable to internet. And while this is happening, a new development has happened from Vietnam. In the Vietnamese cybersecurity law, which got passed last year, they have come for the first time with the concept of a national cyberspace. The entire internet is the national cyberspace of the country. Isn't that a remarkable phenomenon to think of? It's a very good way to say that, look, the entire internet will now be subject to my laws. But easier said than done. Once you start trying to implement your laws outside your territorial boundaries, you begin to start problematic stuff. So what has countries started doing? Countries have started saying, okay, let me not wait for an international law on fake news to come up. Let me instead come up with my own distinctive national laws on fake news. So consequently, we find that different countries have come up with their fake news law. Malaysia was one of the first nations in the world to come up with an anti-fake news act of 2018. They were not only very quick in getting the law passed, but were also able to get a conviction in their fake news law in the first 4 months of the implementation of the law. So there were questions asked that whether the said conviction was okay or not, because a lot of experts felt that conviction was not accurate. And just to give you the sample of the conviction. Well, a fire was taking place somewhere. Somebody just tweeted to say it's been about 9 minutes, but the fire engines have not come in to extinguish the fire. Now, the fire department disputed the claim and said, no, sir, we were there much earlier. So that particular tweet was considered to be fake news. And the person concerned was prosecuted for fake news. He was convicted. He was asked to pay some fine and go away. But he said he doesn't have the money to pay the fine. So the court said, okay, go in for imprisonment for a couple of months before you're out. So that was the first cybercrime, the fake news conviction in Malaysia. A lot of controversies, a lot of criticisms, but the law prevails as what we are. I take you to Germany, and I find there you have the Network Enforcement Act, which of course also seeks to impose fines on social media for obviously illegal content. So different countries, different approaches. Some countries are talking about fake news, some are talking about false information, some other elements are talking about obviously illegal content. So of course, this is the approach that gets adopted in a country like Germany. From Germany, let me take you over to Singapore. In Singapore, we saw a distinctive new dedicated law on fake news coming in, which is the Protection from Online Falsehoods and Manipulation Act 2019. So here, Singapore uses the concept of falsehoods, manipulations, and they of course have come up with various offenses that are connected with the same. France also, way back in 2018, had come up with a distinctive law against the manipulation of information. So I'm beginning to find an ecosystem where different countries are going ahead and trying to address these issues in their own remarkable manner. So for some people, it's fake news. For other countries, it's falsehood. For still others, it's manipulation as we go forward. Russia has also come up with a new bill that's been proposed for publication of false information on social media. And that's been, of course, proposed to be made a cybercrime. This has to be specifically understood, and this must be read in connection and in conjunction with Russia's data localization law, which specifically says that if you have to do business in Russia, then the data of Russians must be physically located within the territorial boundaries of Russia. So how would that apply in the context of fake news? Supposing there was some fake news pertaining to some Russian figure. Were we to actually interpret the law to say that the fake news should potentially must have a Russian connection and must be only amenable for prosecution in Russia? Quick questions, no specific answers as we go forward. In the US, I found that in July 2017, the US had passed the National Defense Authorization Act that specifically targeted Russian disinformation operations. China, on the other hand, has now come up with very, very distinctive laws. They have come up with new cybersecurity laws, and they tend to often cover fake news under the ambit of their broad provisions which are given in their national cybersecurity laws, and there are 3 of them. So when I talk of the interconnection between fake news and cyber law, I begin to start finding that there are so many linkages that the world has just about begun to start scrapping the tip of the iceberg. Traditionally, news was just limited to newspapers, and that was still fine. So if newspapers were disseminating or publishing fake news, they were amenable under the actual world laws. But coming up, the internet has changed the complete paradigm. Internet has not only made geography history, but more significantly, internet has converted all of us into becoming global authors, global transmitters, and global broadcasters of data, which means that sitting in our own homes with our own devices, we can not just write, create any kind of fake news, but we can disseminate, broadcast, publish, transmit, republish the same, or forward the same anywhere in the world. So suddenly, from the traditional media players or news players, you now have a much bigger audience to deal with in terms of people who could potentially be generating and could also be publishing and transmitting fake news. When I look at the data, it is humongous. Well, so many people are constantly getting on to the digital bandwagon. On Facebook, as per this information, more than 300 million photographs get uploaded per day. And every minute, there are 510,000 comments posted and 293,000 statuses updated. That's just about Facebook. And mind you, Facebook is now no longer the flavor of the season. The youngsters have all moved on to the Snapchats and the Instagrams of the world. So it's a different ball game where now new kinds of over-the-top applications, whether it's WhatsApp, Instagram, or even things like Signal or Telegram, which are now providing yet another new kinds of platforms to people to disseminate, create, publish, and refurbish all kinds of fake content, whether it's in the form of audio, video, image, or text. So after I listened to all this, I thought, let me collate what could be the features of fake news so that at least we get some more clarity. Of course, fake news has to be factually inaccurate. It must be optimized for sharing. It must be meant to obscure or distort with emotions, which were preying on prejudice or bias. Well, it is obviously designed in a manner so that it can attract more number of viewers. Invariably, it is aimed for getting more publicity on social media. It is aimed to increase political polarization. It is often aimed to manipulate and influence people so as to not just changing their beliefs, but even changing their interests and focus areas. It is aimed to grab attention, to distract from something more important than the current crucial issues. And of course, sometimes it's done for fun or to inflame people and to discredit, to prove how gullible the opposing tribe, the tribe has to be vis-a-vis others. So when you look at all these elements and into this new recipe, you add in the flavor of an infodemic, you quickly start realizing that you have created something that's going to go out of your control. Coronavirus is not an epidemic. It's not just an pandemic. It's an infodemic. The World Health Organization calls it as an infodemic primarily because apart from the public health emergency aspects, coronavirus age has also seen massive creation, dissemination, and publication of all kinds of fake news. So much so that today, when you go and want to get real information about COVID-19, the chances are that 8 out of 10 times you may actually stumble upon information that's not factually not actually correct or accurate. Very few places are authentic sources where you get correct information. So in these times of the COVID-19, when there is fear and panic all around, on top of it, we find ourselves in a sea of misinformation, false information, and at times of the infodemic, where we itself as users are incapable of distinguishing between what's true, correct information versus what's false, fabricated, forged, manipulated, or laced information of any kind whatsoever. So I believe when there is a push in the direction of fake news, countries now are required to have a fresh relook on how they will go ahead and come up with effective legal frameworks for fake news. Let's take the case in India. In India, we find that India does not have a dedicated law on fake news. The Indian Information Technology Act 2000 is more than 20 years old. It was never drafted keeping in mind fake news. Even the amendments to the Information Technology Act in the year 2008 never had visualized things like fake news and therefore did not really provide for the same. It's a different issue that in 2011, the central government on 11th of April 2011 had notified the Information Technology Rules 2011. These specifically include the Information Technology Intermediary Guidelines Rules 2011. These rules mandate these service providers, intermediaries, to go ahead and not publish any content on their platforms which is false or defamatory or inaccurate. So when I look at the Indian ecosystem, there is no denying the fact that, well, you will have to be now governed with and concerned with the Indian cyber law. Why is the Indian cyber law important? Because according to me, it's one of the 3 most significant laws in Indian history. Why? It's the only law in India that pertains particularly to use of the 7 raw materials that you use on a day-to-day basis. When you use computers, computer systems, computer networks, computer resources, communication devices, as also data and information in the electronic form, you are governed by the same. And therefore, fake news is also sought to be governed primarily because fake news at the end of the day is only just fake electronic records. And I think when I talk about fake electronic records, the role of intermediaries can hardly be overlooked. I believe intermediaries are the big boys of today's world. The Googles, the Facebooks, the Instagrams of the world are intermediaries. The Indian IT Act has defined the concept of intermediary under Section 21W to include any person who on behalf of another person receives, stores, or transmits any particular electronic record or provides any service with respect to that record, and includes network service providers, internet service providers, web hosting companies, online auction portals, online payment sites, cyber cafes, search engines. All intermediaries are today dealing with some form of fake news or the other. The law mandates these intermediaries to exercise due diligence while they discharge their obligations under the law. The entire issue pertaining to legal liability of intermediaries got a constitutional stamping and sealing in the case of Justice of Singh versus Union of India. In this judgment, the Supreme Court held that Section 79 of the IT Act was constitutionally valid. And Section 79 mandates these service providers to exercise due diligence while they discharge their obligations under the law, which means that they have to comply with the IT Act and the rules and regulations thereunder. So when they are expected to exercise due diligence, various parameters of due diligence have been given under the Indian Information Technology Act and the rules and regulations made thereunder. But the fact is that most of these service providers are only choosing to give lip service to the Indian cyber laws. Why? Because they're all hiding behind the Supreme Court judgment in Singh. In Singh, the Supreme Court of India held that as a service provider, you are going to be inundated with requests to remove content. So don't do anything. Please sit down and stay put till such time you either get a court order or an order from a governmental agency. Only then you would go ahead and remove content. So that's why from 2015 till today, the Indian ecosystem has begun to start seeing intermediaries becoming mere spectators, while mayhem happens on their network, while all kinds of fake news is disseminated on their networks. And I think when these are not really doing stuff, I believe the time has come that we should, in India as a nation, try to have a relook at the entire issue pertaining to intermediary liability. The President Trump's executive order for intermediary liability could be a starting point. Though it's been legally challenged in the US, it has indeed had a triggering effect in different countries to go ahead and have a relook as to what their national laws are on intermediary liability and whether countries would want to go ahead and make these intermediaries more responsible for fake news. So I believe while the law is there, there are some tips I thought I wanted to share with you just to make sure that you could make a distinction between what's fake news versus what's normal news. Have a closer look. Look beyond the headlines. Check other sources. Check the facts. Check your biases. And check, is it actually a joke or not? So I believe as we go forward, fake news is going to become a cottage industry. There will be fake news outlets, not just in big cities, but small cities and even in semi-urban and rural areas. And fake news is going to impact almost every area of human activity and endeavor. So therefore, with a massive tsunami of fake news that's coming, thanks to the massive push that coronavirus has started giving us in the entire world, I believe the time has come for countries to start looking at more cogent, effective legal remedies to deal with fake news. Well, it's predicted that by 2022, the majority of individuals in mature economies will consume more false information than true information. So imagine if in a day you are consuming 100 units of information, and out of that 100 units, more than 50 or 55% of those units are false information. See the kind of effect it's going to have upon you as an individual, upon your thinking processes, upon your perspectives, upon your biases, upon your opinions, and upon your judgment sets. So I think we are looking towards a potential disaster that's waiting to happen. Till such time, we don't effectively wake up and start doing effective steps today. So it's actually been predicted that by 2020, AI creation of counterfeit reality or fake content will outpace AI's ability to detect it, fomenting digital distrust. Actually, we already have started creating and disseminating digital distrust. And this distrust has got a direct connection with fake news. The more the fake news, the more the digital distrust. And therefore, countries have begun to start coming up with new approaches on how to deal with these new challenges of fake news and how to deal with the tremendous connotations and the societal ramifications of fake news. Just having a law on fake news would not suffice. Countries have to quickly start realizing how their populations and their mental thought processes are sought to be eroded or prejudicially impacted by fake news. So just to conclude, all I can say is, as far as cyber law jurisprudence is concerned, it's evolving, but in this evolving cyber law jurisprudence, fake news will play a very, very important role as a big thrust area. And it's already become very important and will continue to grow in size and impact with each passing day. But therefore, all eyes will be on cyber law jurisprudence and how it evolves with the passage of time so as to deal with the menace of fake news and its dissemination on social media or otherwise. That's what I thought I just will quickly share with all of you. I would now be happy to take any specific questions or any questions that Mr. Singh or anyone else would like to ask me. I'm actually now disconnecting my share. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for this interesting and enlightening session. Participants can ask their questions in the chat box or they can raise their hands.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, please go ahead. We can hear you.
Sir, there is a question from Asmita. How to identify if a source is publishing verified news after fact checking? Are the legal or regulatory standards applied effectively?
Currently, the legal and regulatory standards are not at all applied effectively in these kinds of scenarios, primarily because they have not yet been born. Ask any law policymaker what these standards are, and it's invariably going to be that they would not really have a complete clear idea. Even when I look at the various legislative approaches in different countries, I find that there is a thought process focus is different. Somewhere the focus is on fake news. At other places, it's on online falsehoods. At another places, it's on manipulation. So somewhere down the line, I think countries will have to start coming up with common minimum denominators as to what all is going to constitute fake news. The critics of fake news say, well, fake news is itself nothing but a prejudicial way of the elite judging the non-elite. Well, who's going to be the judge of what is fake news? The judiciary cannot be the judge because the judiciary cannot adjudicate all this. The law enforcement agencies should definitely not be the judge, primarily because they will start interpreting these kind of fake news in their own remarkable manner. So I think it's all got to do with coming up with objective legal parameters on what's fake news. Now, in the Indian context, I find that different services have come up. These boom checks and other services have come up, which tell you that they did their own fact checking and found out whether this was correct or not. It could be a good starting point that you could start using these services. But before you use any of these services, quickly please appreciate going to the background of these services, because a couple of these services itself are being funded by not so brilliant or not so clean sources. So let's not put our entire digital trust into someone's hands who itself does not really deserve the same. I think we have to quickly start realizing that we have to be our own warrior. We will have to do our own checking our own selves. And the best way to do is independently go to these meta search engines. Don't rely upon Google alone, because Google has a monopolistic algorithm and it only dishes you the way you want to look at things. But if you start looking at some of these meta search engines like Dogpile and Mama, they tend to get you a more holistic perspective of what other search engines are also telling you. There are also some social media search engines. You could also look at that to give you some kind of a sentiment analysis of whether any content is indeed correct or not. But at the end of the day, don't be in a hurry to immediately rely upon something that you see online. Just because it's available online or it's available on the internet does not mean it is accurate. It could be false. And in case if you rely upon such false information and then you publish something or you make some assertions or make some averments, quickly realize you are going to be equally liable, because that fake news or the news that you were relying on was third-party information. And when you relied upon the said information, you yourself became an intermediary under Section 21W of the Indian Information Technology Act. Once you became an intermediary, you yourself are mandated under Section 79(2)(c) of the IT Act to exercise due diligence while you discharge your obligations under law. So I think it all have to be creating your own, arsenal of due diligences. Yes, it will require more effort, more time, but I think it's going to make us far more cautious. Please understand, we are now in coronavirus times. By the time we come to the close of coronavirus, we are going to see a massive increase in litigation. There'll be a huge wave of litigation across the world. And I don't want any one of us to be unnecessarily stuck in some litigation only because we relied upon some fake news or we published or republished the same. Already the Madras High Court has actually held that if you are a WhatsApp group administrator, then you are responsible for what really goes ahead and gets published on your particular WhatsApp group. So it's always a great idea never to be an admin of WhatsApp groups, specifically when you really cannot control what's being disseminated therein. A lot of people have been arrested thanks to this particular law, but you will have to be cautious, careful as you go forward, and hopefully wait for the time till such time the law comes up with more clear, transparent, accountable standards as to what should be the parameters of really determining fake news. Thanks.
Sir, there is one more question from Dr. A. Samson. whether fake news will affect the economy of the country.
There is no to denying, Dr. Sampson, that the fake news will definitely affect every area of human activity and endeavor. Not just law, not just lawyers, not just the judiciary, not just the law enforcement agencies, but all kind of economic activities. Let me give you an example. Recently, we saw one fake news coming in, and thanks to that particular fake news coming in, the pricing of a particular cryptocurrency or a crypto asset really went very high. Of course, it crashed the next day, but people who had to make the money, made the money and exited. So fake news is going to play on people's emotions, and it's going to have a prejudicial impact upon the stock exchanges, upon these various kinds of platforms where shares are being bought and sold. Also, it could have a direct impact upon the economic activity, because one kind of a rumor, even if it's bad or inaccurate, may be sufficient to cause enough economic loss. So I believe we should not really underestimate or undermine the nuisance value of fake news in creating more economic loss or more economic headaches for people. Thanks.
So there is a question from Gurmeet Kaur. Gurmeet, I will unmute you. You can ask the question to sir.
Hello, good evening, sir.
Good
I'm
evening.
audible.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, my question is that if someone sends us fake link or fake news and we forward that link or fake news, then we will not have any problem.
No, I think you will have a lot of problem. For the very simple reason, if you are sending a link of a fake news, that itself link would constitute kind of false information, because the information that you are ultimately sending is a link to fabricated information. So technically, somebody could potentially take legal action against you. Now,
Okay.
you could be lucky and there is no matter being reported or no cases being done. But traditionally, when I look at the Indian Penal Code, when you create fake news, you are doing electronic forgery, because you are creating false electronic records either for the purposes of cheating. That is an offense under 468 IPC, punishable with 7 years imprisonment and fine. Or you could create just false electronic records as forged electronic records for the purposes of harming the reputation of another person. And that could be an offense under section 469 of the Indian Penal Code, punishable with 3 years imprisonment and fine. So I believe we should exercise due diligence. As far as possible, we should not be forwarding links till such time we are ourselves convinced about the adequacy, accuracy, and authenticity of the information that you are disseminating. A lot of time, this suddenly message comes up on my WhatsApp, and I feel I must now instantaneously share this with my family, with my friends. That urge, I believe, will have to be curtailed. You will have to be more duly diligent in order to be sharing information. Otherwise, it could potentially have the ramifications for you in the same capacity as that of an intermediary under Section 2 of the IT Act. Thanks.
There is one more question from Vibhu Prasad. He is asking, is cyber security and privacy part of users' experience and quality of service provision?
Whether cyber security or privacy is part of a user experience, it's a fantastic interpretation. Unfortunately, the law has not yet gone in that direction per se. Even when I look at the dedicated national cybersecurity laws, we don't yet find a movement in that direction. India, we are far behind. India, there's not even a dedicated law on cybersecurity. All we have in India is the National Cybersecurity Policy of 2013, which is at best only a paper tiger, because we were never able to implement the said law, the said policy. Now in 2020, there are news in the public domain that India is coming up with a National Cybersecurity Strategy 2020. Hopefully, that could throw some particular light on the issue that you raised. But as of now, whether cybersecurity and privacy is part of user experience, definitely not from a legal standpoint, but yes, from a user standpoint, when I am doing a user interface with any application, with any platform, I have an implicit presumption to expect that my service provider will keep my data secure, my data private, and will take all steps possible to protect my data. Well, last few weeks, we've seen some remarkable gang wars on the darknet. One instance, 2.9 crore Indians' data of Truecaller was leaked out. Another instance, couple of other crores data of Indians was made available for sale. So with this kind of data breaches happening all across, I believe it's only logical for lawmakers to start stipulating that both cybersecurity and privacy need to be an integral, logical expectation of legitimate users who are using your platforms, and should be an integral part of the user interface per se. I also want to take this opportunity to go a step further. I think right now, the developments that are taking place, there is no denying the fact that cybersecurity has occupied a central position in our day-to-day lives. And I would not hesitate to say that cybersecurity is a basic human right. It's not just a right, it's not just a fundamental right, it's going to be a basic human right. Why? Because today, you cannot live a dignified human life without having to access to secure parameters in cyberspace. Already when I look at Article 21 of the Constitution, that includes the right to a dignified human life, I believe both the right to access the internet and also the right to cybersecurity should be an integral component of your fundamental right under Article 21 of the Constitution of India. Thanks.
There are a lot of questions coming. I can see that.
Okay.
So there is a question from Sunaina Khurana. Is it true that our data from social media apps like WhatsApp are no more secured?
You are bang on target. Your data from social media apps are not at all secure. So you have to be careful of what you're going to do with social media apps. You have to quickly realize that India is currently undergoing two kinds of revolutions simultaneously, silent but very effective revolutions. The first is the great Indian recording revolution. Indians have all turned into great recorders. We are recording all kinds of information on our devices, on our laptops, on our phones, and the like. Second is, simultaneously, India has also seen a great Indian vomiting revolution, where Indians are simultaneously vomiting a lot of their personal, professional, social data on these social media apps. So please don't trust these social media apps with your eyes closed. If you're on Facebook or Instagram, please realize, go through this privacy policy and you'll quickly realize that they have no respect on your privacy per se. If you are using on WhatsApp, go to their terms and conditions, and you'll quickly realize that WhatsApp has been sharing all your information with Facebook and Facebook group of companies since September 2016. So I think if privacy is your topmost premium point, then you have to be very consciously careful as to which all social media platform you really want to use. I would rather encourage you to use over-the-top applications like Signal, who have got very strong data protection as also privacy policies, and who have taken public stands that they are not going to disclose the private keys of their encrypted communication with governments, including Government of Australia, because they value the privacy of their citizens far more. But please read through the terms and conditions and privacy policy in detail before you really jump on any social media platform and before you start vomiting all kinds of information about yourself. What you don't realize is if you're going to be publishing everything on the platform today, this is going to be the fodder for your subsequent interviews in examinations, in education institutions, and for jobs, because they will also be going through the same information for purposes of coming to a judgment as to whether you are a good enough candidate to even be given admission or a particular employment. So please realize what you do today could potentially and prejudicially impact your digital future. Be careful on what you want to publish on which social media handle or app. Thanks.
Should we take more questions or?
Well, it's up to you. We already we could take a couple of them if you want.
So one more question from Pradeep Kumar Mehra. I will unmute you, sir. You can ask your question directly. You are unmuted, Pradeep.
Are you hearing me, sir?
Yeah, I'm hearing you. Please go ahead.
Yeah, are you listening me, sir?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Can I ask a question in Hindi, sir? because Hindi is my mother tongue.
आप हिंदी में सवाल पूछिए, कोई बात नहीं।
सर आपने ये जो जिक्र किया था अभी यहाँ पे ड्यू डिलिजेंस टू अंडर आईटी एक्ट, ड्यू डिलिजेंस ड्यू टू कंप्लायंसेस, तो कंप्लायंसेस कैसे, मतलब किस टाइप से ये रिलेटेड करता है, थोड़ा सा डिस्क्राइब कर पाएंगे इससे?
देखिए, भारत का जो सूचना प्रौद्योगिकी कानून है, जो इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी एक्ट है, वो इंटरमीडिएट की परिभाषा करता है। वो इंटरमीडिएट की परिभाषा सेक्शन 2(1)W में बहुत विस्तार रूप से उन्होंने परिभाषित कर रखी है। इतना विशाल है ये परिभाषा कि लगभग भारतवर्ष में 9 out of 10 जो लीगल एंटिटीज हैं वो इंटरमीडिएट बन जाती हैं। तो एक बार आप इंटरमीडिएट हैं तब धारा 79 आईटी एक्ट कहती है कि आप ड्यू डिलिजेंस जरूर करें। ड्यू डिलिजेंस के जो विभिन्न पैरामीटर्स हैं वो परिभाषित हैं आईटी एक्ट में और आईटी रूल। मसलन आपको एज एन इंटरमीडिएट आईटी रूल्स, खास तौर पे इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी इंटरमीडिएट गाइडलाइंस रूल्स 2011 के तमाम सारे पहलुओं का पालन करना है। आपके पास डिटेल्ड टर्म्स एंड कंडीशंस होने चाहिए, रूल्स एंड रेगुलेशंस होने चाहिए, प्राइवेसी पॉलिसी होनी चाहिए और उसमें आपको बताना चाहिए कि आप अपने उपभोक्ताओं को किन किन चीजों की परमिशन दे रहे हैं, कि वो किस तरह का कंटेंट आपके यहाँ अपलोड कर सकते हैं और कौन सा कंटेंट आपके प्लेटफॉर्म पर अपलोड नहीं कर सकते। तो पहली बात ये। दूसरी बात, अगर आप इंटरमीडिएट हैं तो कानून कहता है कि आप साइबर सुरक्षा पर भी थोड़ी तवज्जो या महत्व देंगे। इसके लिए आपको कानून दिशा निर्देश देता है कि आप रीजनेबल सिक्योरिटी प्रैक्टिसेस और प्रोसीजर्स अपनाएंगे, जो प्रैक्टिसेस रूल 8 ऑफ द आईटी इंटरमीडिएट गाइडलाइंस रूल्स के अंदर परिभाषित है। मसलन अगर आप ISO 27001 जो अंतरराष्ट्रीय मापदंड है उसके पैरामीटर का पालन करते हैं, तब आपको माना जाएगा कानून के दृष्टिकोण में कि आप रीजनेबल सिक्योरिटी प्रैक्टिसेस और प्रोसीजर्स का पालन कर रहे हैं। साथ ही साथ भारतीय आईटी एक्ट के प्रावधानों का पालन करना जरूरी है। आपकी इलेक्ट्रॉनिक रिटेंशन है वो उसी प्रकार से होनी चाहिए जो सेक्शन 7 भारतीय आईटी एक्ट में लिखी गई है। साथ ही साथ अगर आप इलेक्ट्रॉनिक ऑथेंटिकेशन कर रहे हैं तो वो केवल एक डिजिटल सिग्नेचर द्वारा ही किया जा सकता है, जो कि एक ड्यूली लाइसेंस सर्टिफाइंग अथॉरिटी आपको इशू करती है। सिमिलरली अगर आप सेंसिटिव पर्सनल डेटा के साथ डील, हैंडल या प्रोसेस कर रहे हैं तो आपको कुछ एडिशनल कंप्लायंसेस करनी पड़ती हैं, जैसे कि सरकार ने नोटिफाई किया है भारत का इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी रीजनेबल सिक्योरिटी प्रैक्टिसेस एंड प्रोसीजर्स एंड सेंसिटिव पर्सनल डेटा और इंफॉर्मेशन रूल्स 2011। इनमें कहा गया है कि सेंसिटिव पर्सनल डेटा क्या क्या है, तो आपको देखना पड़ेगा कि क्या आप सेंसिटिव पर्सनल डेटा को डील, हैंडल, प्रोसेस तो नहीं कर रहे हैं, और अगर कर रहे हैं तो इस रूल्स के मापदंडों को भी आपको पालन करना पड़ेगा। मसलन कि आपको लोगों की कंसेंट पहले लेनी पड़ेगी, उन्हें बताना पड़ेगा कि आप किस तरह से उनका सेंसिटिव पर्सनल जानकारी एकत्रित कर रहे हैं, किस उद्देश्य के लिए कर रहे हैं, किस तरीके से वो सेव किया जाएगा, क्या उनको अधिकार होगा कि वो आपके जो सेव्ड डेटा है उसमें परिवर्तन कर सकें या ना कर सकें। तो बहुत सारे ऐसे पैरामीटर्स हैं। अगर आप आईटी एक्ट और आईटी रूल्स पर दृष्टि डाल लेंगे तो तमाम सारे ड्यू डिलिजेंस के पैरामीटर्स आ जाएंगे। उच्चतम न्यायालय ने श्रेया सिंघल वाले मुकदमे में भी इस बात को पुनः से दोहराया था कि इन इंटरमीडिएट्स को ड्यू डिलिजेंस करना होगा। मुझे लगता है कि ये ड्यू डिलिजेंस एक सुरक्षा कवच है जो प्रत्येक प्रकार के इंटरमीडिएट को पहनना चाहिए। कुछ दिन पहले भारतीय टेलीविजन पर महाभारत और रामायण जैसे एपिक सीरीज आए थे। जब हम महाभारत में दृष्टि डालते हैं, खासतौर पर गीता के उपदेश में, तो भगवान कृष्ण का एक सेंट्रल संदेश रहता है। भगवान कृष्ण कहते हैं कि आप मेरी शरण में आइए और मैं आपकी रक्षा करूंगा। तो आईटी एक्ट एक सिमिलर मैसेज लेकर आता है कि अगर आप आईटी एक्ट के प्रावधानों का पालन करें तो आईटी एक्ट आपको गारंटी देता है कि ना तो आपको जेल भेजा जा सकता है और ना ही आपको ₹1 डैमेजेस बाय वे ऑफ कॉम्पेंसेशन देने के लिए विवश किया जा सकता है। तो अगर आप ये ड्यू डिलिजेंस करें तो काफी हद तक आप एक सुरक्षा कवच पहन सकते हैं और कानून की जो प्रोटेक्शन है उसके दायरे में आ सकते हैं। आजकल माहौल बहुत अनसर्टन है, अनरीजनेबल है, पता नहीं किस वक्त क्या होने वाला है, और डिजिटल इकोसिस्टम में तो बहुत ज्यादा अनसर्टनिटी है। इसलिए मैं प्रत्येक क्लाइंट्स को और इंटरमीडिएट्स को लगातार कहता हूं कि आप जहां तक हो सके अपने ड्यू डिलिजेंस का कवच जरूर पहनिए ताकि आप अपने आप को और अपने डेटा को सुरक्षित रख सकें। धन्यवाद।
All raised questions will you can mail us, anyone of you. We will forward it to sir. Sir, is it okay?
That's absolutely fine. We will take these questions offline as well. But I want to really take this opportunity for giving me this particular opportunity to come and address and share my views. You see, I believe you're all brilliant judicial minds, brilliant young lawyers, and there's nothing that I can really sensitize. I thought I just want to tell you what's happening in the world so that your attention could be a bit more focused on how the legal nuances pertaining to fake news and cyber law are evolving. But it's a sheer pleasure and honor, and more so when we had the Honorable former Chief Justice of India being with us the entire session and very keenly listening. Sir, it's been a sheer pleasure and honor. One has learned so much from you, and we really look up to you. Thank you for being such a source of inspiration, guidance for all of us. And thank you. Over to you, Mr. Singh.
Thank you so much, sir, for this interesting session. And sir, your ability to present the topic in such an interesting way made this evening a memorable one. Now, I would like to invite Mr. D.K. Singh to say a few words.
In allusion, and it should be constant attempt to rule of for the keep to criminality lowest, especially in the society. It is dependent upon the more technology, crime based the electronic means lawmaking are bound to increase, and lawmakers and technology is always double-edged sword, and it can be used for the both the purposes good and bad. As far as the fake news is concerned, it's just like a cancer disease these days. And we can see each and every moment the fake news is spreading just like a fire in a forest. And it should be a tenacious effort to the rulers and lawmakers to ensure the technology to grow the healthy atmosphere or healthy manner. It is used for the legal or ethical business growth, not for the committing crime. And Mr. Duggal has enlightened us in very great manner. But unfortunately, Mr. Honorable Justice, I won't be able to get the views of Honorable Chief Justice of India. Earlier, so many times we met and we shared the dais so many times. But if this honorable justice give me some time and enlighten us on this particular issue. Your Lordship, are you hearing me?
Yes, sir, I am hearing.
Because today it's my very hard luck because it was because you must have also enlightened us today. Because due to the paucity of time, Mr. Pavan Duggal was the orator today, yes. And he's the.
But he has given an excellent presentation. He has given an excellent presentation during the desert. So nothing more to add.
If you share something, it will be better for us.
Okay. Only thing I can add that the youngsters who are very bound to use all these Instagram, WhatsApp, and all these should be extremely careful, and they should not misuse any of the opportunity so that they may get into trouble. The law is developing, and they have to be careful in future and using. This is a wonderful scientific development. We are good. This is a great boon. This information technology, all this we got a great boon. But never to misuse it. Never to misuse it. And and this Mr. Duggal has given extensive details. What is the problem with which is all over the world, and we are bound to keep very, very knowledgeable about all the aspects of these things. I don't want to speak about the subject on this occasion. Nice meeting all of you, and I'm.
Sir, I also want to give the credit to Mr. R.P. Singh, Rajinder Pal Singh. His tenacious effort always.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Honorable Justice Sir, Honorable Justice Sir, Dr. Pavan Duggal Sir, and Dr. D.K. Singh, Vice Chairman, Bar Council of Delhi, has helped me lot in making grand success of this event. I cannot forget to say that Bar Council of Delhi, D.K. Singh Sir, helped me lot. Honorable Justice Balakrishnan sir and Pavan Duggal sir give us a lot of support in making this event a great success. Thank you all. Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you all.